always believed birthdays were meant to be simple, a cake, a wish, and maybe a moment of joy before everything returned to normal. But when I turned 18, life had something else planned. I woke up that morning not only to balloons and laughter echoing through the house, but also to a face I had not seen in years. My stepbrother had returned. The same boy who had disappeared suddenly when family disputes tore our home apart. He had gone away without looking back, and in his absence, no one ever spoke much about him. I used to imagine him living freely somewhere, never thinking about us again. Yet here he was, walking back through the door as though nothing had changed, except everything had. He looked older, sharper, no longer the protective yet distant brother I remembered. His presence stirred something inside me that I couldn't quite name. As guests crowded around to welcome him, I found myself watching quietly, trying to understand the weight of his sudden return. The family acted like this was just a reunion, but to me, it felt like a disruption, a piece of the past colliding with my new beginning. My 18th birthday was supposed to symbolize independence, freedom, a step into adulthood. Instead, his eyes followed me in a way that unsettled me, as though he saw me differently now, no longer a little girl but someone else entirely. Throughout the day, I felt his gaze brush against me, subtle but deliberate. It wasn't the look of an older brother checking in. It was longer, heavier, and far more complicated. I tried to ignore it, laughing with friends, cutting the cake, pretending not to notice. But every time I looked up, he was there, quietly observing, his lips forming a faint smile that seemed to hold secrets. My mother fussed over him, my stepfather clapped his back with pride, and everyone else welcomed him with open arms. Yet beneath the cheer, I sensed something unspoken, a distance in his tone, a shadow in his smile, like he hadn't returned only for family. When it came time for gifts, I expected something ordinary. Maybe a book, a necklace, or money slipped into an envelope. Instead, he handed me a small box, his eyes meeting mine as though daring me to open it in front of everyone. Inside was a silver pendant, delicate and understated, but it carried more weight than gold. "It's yours now," he said softly, his words meant for me alone. No one else noticed the pause in his voice, but I felt it echo inside me. It wasn't the pendant that shook me, it was the way he gave it, as if he was passing something deeper, a message that only I was meant to read. That night, when the candles were blown and the laughter faded, I lay awake with the pendant resting against my chest. His return was no accident, and the gift was not just a token of affection. It was something more, something that hinted at a truth I wasn't ready to face. On my 18th birthday, I received more than I could ever unwrap, and it was only the beginning of what would change everything. The days after my birthday felt different, as if the walls of the house held a secret that only he and I could hear. My stepbrother's presence lingered everywhere, from the way he moved through the kitchen in the morning to the sound of his footsteps in the hallway at night. What unsettled me most was not his return but the way my heart reacted to him. It beat differently, faster, whenever he was near, and no matter how hard I tried to suppress it, the feeling refused to fade. At first, our conversations were polite, casual, the kind that family members are supposed to have after years apart. He asked about school, my plans for the future, how life had been while he was gone. But beneath his words, I caught glimpses of something deeper, something unspoken. The pauses in his sentences carried weight, and the way his eyes held mine for a moment too long left me restless. Soon, those conversations stretched into the night. When the house grew quiet and everyone else was asleep, we would find ourselves talking in hushed voices, sharing pieces of ourselves we never dared say out loud in the daylight. He told me about the years away, how he had struggled to build a life, how he resented the way our family had fallen apart, how he had carried loneliness like a shadow that never left him. There was pain in his voice, but also relief, as though finally he had someone willing to listen without judgment. I found myself opening up too, confessing fears I had never shared with anyone. How trapped I felt, how misunderstood, how I longed for freedom but didn't know where to find it. In those exchanges, something dangerous began to form, a bond that was no longer defined by family ties but by a need we both carried inside. It became impossible to ignore the closeness between us. Every brush of his hand felt deliberate, every smile carried a hidden meaning. I tried to remind myself of who he was supposed to be in my life, but the lines blurred each time his voice softened and he called me by name as though it meant more than it should. And then one night, he confessed. The gift he had given me on my birthday was never just a pendant. It was his way of saying what he could not speak aloud in front of everyone, that he had come back because of me. He admitted that time and distance had not erased what he felt, that leaving had not been an escape but a delay, and that he could no longer hide what had grown inside him. The moment those words reached me, my world shifted. I should have felt fear or anger, but instead I felt a pull stronger than reason. It was wrong, dangerous, forbidden, but his confession lit a fire inside me that I could not put out. That night, when his hand brushed mine and neither of us pulled away, I knew the bond we had crossed into was one we could never undo. Once his confession was spoken, nothing between us remained the same. The silence that used to fall between our words was now charged, heavy with meaning, as if even the air around us knew what we were hiding. Every stolen glance became bolder, every casual touch lingered longer, and each night felt like a test of how long we could resist what had already taken root. I told myself it was madness, that what we felt could not be allowed, but my heart ignored reason. When he looked at me, I no longer saw a stepbrother. I saw a man who had been waiting for me, and I hated how much I craved that. It started with whispers in darkened corners, moments where our hands would meet under the table, our shoulders brushing as though the smallest contact could satisfy the hunger building between us. But it never did. The more we gave in to those little gestures, the more the need grew, until one night, the line we had been carefully tiptoeing around shattered completely. His lips met mine in a quiet room where no one could see, and for a moment, the world ceased to exist. The kiss was not hesitant or uncertain, it was desperate, urgent, and it carried years of silence finally breaking free. In the days that followed, secrecy became our companion. We moved through the house like shadows, careful and cautious, yet every opportunity to be alone was seized with an intensity that terrified me. He would slip into my room when the household slept, or I would find myself in his space under the excuse of a late-night talk. What we shared was not just passion but escape, from expectations, from the rigid roles forced on us, from the weight of pretending. The more we indulged, the harder it became to remember boundaries, until they no longer existed at all. But with every stolen moment came the haunting voice of guilt. I would lie awake after he left, the silver pendant cool against my skin, and wonder what would happen if anyone found out. My mother's trust, my stepfather's pride, the family already broken once before, it would all shatter again, only worse. Yet no matter how many times I told myself to stop, my body and my heart betrayed me. The thrill of the forbidden consumed me, and the fear of discovery only seemed to make the fire burn hotter. One evening, we came dangerously close to being caught. A door creaked open down the hall while his hand was still in mine, and we froze, breathless, hearts racing. That moment of fear should have been a warning, a chance to step back before it was too late. Instead, when the footsteps faded, he pulled me closer, and I let him. The risk no longer frightened me, it only made the desire stronger. By then, I knew there was no turning back. What we had begun could not be undone, and whatever price we would pay, it was already written into the path we had chosen. The closer we grew, the heavier the secret became. Every stolen embrace left behind invisible marks, not on our skin but on our conscience. What had once felt like freedom now pressed down on me like chains I could not break. Each morning, when I joined my family at the breakfast table, I felt the guilt burning inside me, certain that one wrong glance would expose the truth. Yet when he looked across at me with that same quiet intensity, I knew I would let it happen again and again. The danger became part of the bond, and I realized we were no longer just hiding from our family, we were hiding from ourselves. It did not take long for suspicion to grow. My mother noticed the way I disappeared too often. My stepfather questioned why I lingered in the hallways late at night. Their eyes carried doubt, though they had no proof. I tried to laugh it off, to pretend I was still the same girl they trusted, but deep down I knew the cracks were forming. Secrets never stay buried, not when they are fed daily with desire. And ours was no exception. The unraveling came slowly, not in a dramatic revelation but in quiet moments that spoke too loudly. A glance held too long during dinner. A slip of his hand brushing against mine when others were near. A door closed behind us when it should have stayed open. Each small mistake drew us closer to discovery, and though fear twisted inside me, I could not stop. The thought of letting go felt unbearable, as though I would be losing more than a forbidden lover. I would be losing the only person who truly saw me. But fate does not allow sins to remain hidden forever. One evening, as I slipped out of his room, my mother stood in the hallway, her eyes wide with disbelief. In that single moment, everything shattered. She did not need words to understand. The silence between us screamed louder than any confession. The look in her eyes was not only of betrayal but of devastation, as though she had lost both a daughter and a son in the same breath. My stepfather's anger followed soon after, his disappointment cutting deeper than any punishment. The house that once felt suffocating now felt unbearable, every wall echoing with judgment. He left again, just as suddenly as he had returned, but this time the departure carried finality. There were no promises, no whispered plans to reunite. Only a heavy silence that told me the cost of what we had done could never be undone. I was left with the pendant, the so-called gift, cold against my skin, a reminder of the fire we had ignited and the ruin it left behind. On my 18th birthday, I thought I had received freedom. Instead, I had been handed a lesson carved into my soul. Desire can feel like love, passion can disguise itself as truth, but the price of surrendering to it is always far greater than you imagine. I lost him, I lost my family's trust, and most of all, I lost the version of myself that believed innocence could last forever.